will review the development proposal. Within 10 business days of receiving the form, the risk management official will provide a letter or notice to the proponent and copy the municipality. The letter or notice will indicate one of 4 possible outcomes. The proposal is not affected by policies in the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan. The proposal involves activities that are already covered by a risk management plan. The proposal includes prohibited activities and cannot be engaged in at the proposed location, or the proposal includes an activity that requires a risk management plan. If the letter or notice states that no further action is necessary for source protection, either because the proposal is not affected or the threat is already addressed by a risk management plan, regular municipal procedures may resume. If the proposed activity is prohibited by the source protection plan, the application cannot continue. If the proposal requires a risk management plan, proceed to Step 5. Step 5 only applies if a risk management plan is required. The person planning to undertake the activity of concern will negotiate a risk management plan with the risk management official. Once the plan is agreed to by both parties, the risk management official will provide the proponent with a copy of the risk management plan along with a notice. Once the development proponent provides the municipality with a copy of the notice, regular municipal procedures may resume. In general, Part 4 policies should be straightforward to implement, with current activities of concern already noted and ready to be addressed, and future activities appropriately flagged by Section 59 restricted land uses. However, if necessary, Part 4 of the Clean Water Act provides risk management officials and inspectors with enforcement powers. The Clean Water Act permits trained people to be appointed as risk management officials and/or inspectors. In the Cataraqui Source Protection Area, staff have been appointed to fill both roles. The Clean Water Act provides different responsibilities for risk management officials and inspectors. Risk management officials are the administrators, while risk management inspectors ensure compliance. This slide presents an overview of the general roles and the orders that can be issued by either a risk management official or a risk management inspector. Risk management officials are responsible for ensuring that risk management plans are in place as per the Source Protection Plan. They also must issue notices and letters to support restricted land use policies. If a risk assessment is submitted under Section 60 of the Act to lower the vulnerability score of a particular area such that an activity is no longer considered significant, the risk management official must consider acceptance of this assessment. Finally, the risk management official must prepare an annual report about Part 4 implementation and submit it to the Source Protection Authority by February 1st. To support the risk management official's responsibilities, the Clean Water Act includes provisions that in order to require a disclosure report explaining a complex operation can be made to inform risk management plan content. The Act also enables risk management officials to cause work to be done to support a risk management inspector enforcement order. This means that the risk management official is performing the work necessary to comply with the order. Risk management inspectors ensure compliance with Part 4 policies. This is accomplished by performing inspections and, when necessary, by issuing orders to cease and desist an activity to comply with the prohibition, or to set out directions to achieve compliance with a risk management plan. The risk management inspector is responsible for prosecuting offenses under Part 4. Part 4 offenses include failure to comply with Section 57 prohibitions, failure to comply with Section 58 risk management plan requirements, failure to comply with a Section 63 enforcement order, failure to comply with a risk management official order to provide a report under Section 61, and obstruction or submission of false information under Sections 90 and 91. Offenses under the Clean Water Act are prosecuted under the Provincial Offences Act. Risk management inspectors are provincial officers under the Provincial Offences Act, and the risk management inspector may begin a prosecution under the Provincial Offences Act if a person commits any of the listed offenses. The Clean Water Act sets out the penalties for offenses, including fines up to $25,000 a day for an individual's first offense, up to $50,000 a day for subsequent offenses, or fines up to $50,000 a day for a corporation's first offense, up to $100,000 a day for subsequent convictions. When a person falls under Section 57 or Section 58, i.e. prohibition or risk management plans, they have the option of preparing a risk assessment under Section 60 of the Clean Water Act. The risk assessment issues a challenge to be excluded from Part 4 policies. This requires changing the vulnerability score of their area and proof that the proposed activity would not be a significant drinking water threat. This is a situation that could occur as the assessment report becomes outdated. The risk assessment is meant to determine whether or not the assumptions that were made in the assessment report for vulnerable areas were accurate for a specific site where an activity is occurring. The risk assessment is not questioning whether or not the activity would be a significant drinking water threat in a vulnerable area. It is verifying if a vulnerability scoring for an entire vulnerable area is applicable to a specific area, if that specific area does not have the same vulnerability characteristics as the rest of the vulnerable area. An example is provided on this slide. If a vulnerable area includes a shallow aquifer that is vulnerable to surface contamination, a risk assessment could be used to demonstrate that on a particular property, the aquifer is actually much deeper and not vulnerable to surface contamination. Therefore, the risk assessment would conclude that the activity does not represent the same level of risk that it does in the rest of the vulnerable area, although that had been an assumption in the Source Protection Plan. The risk assessment would need to be prepared by a qualified person and would need to comply with the rules and regulations as outlined by the Clean Water Act. If a risk assessment is accepted by the risk management official, then the activity at that specific location is exempted from the application of Section 57 and Section 58. Under the Clean Water Act, orders from the risk management official or inspector can be appealed to the Environmental Review Tribunal, an independent and impartial body. A person has a right to apply in writing for a hearing before the Environmental Review Tribunal to appeal orders from the risk management official within 60 days of receiving them. A person requesting a hearing before the Environmental Review Tribunal must state in their notice the grounds on which the person intends to rely at the hearing. The Environmental Review Tribunal may confirm, alter, or revoke the risk management official's decision. Once the tribunal has made a decision, it cannot be appealed. All residents within 120 meters of the relevant site and all interested parties, including the municipality and the Source Protection Authority, will be given notice of the hearings. Hearings will be held within the community where the activity is taking place. Residents and interested parties can be observers or participants in the hearing. There are many resources available to you for more information about Part 4 of the Clean Water Act. These resources are all available through the Clean Water Cataraqui website. The Part 4 primer, interactive maps, and restricted land use information sheets are some of the tools that could be useful during Part 4 policy implementation, and they can all be found on the Clean Water Cataraqui website. The primer gives a brief overview and introduction to Part 4 of the Clean Water Act and its implications for the Cataraqui Source Protection Area. The interactive maps list specific Part 4 policies in each intake protection zone and wellhead protection area. The restricted land use information sheets are designed to be a guide for proponents and municipal planners to determine if Part 4 policies apply to a proposed activity. Other resources that will be provided in this Workshop in a Box package will be discussed at the end of this presentation. You are encouraged to contact the risk management official at the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority whenever there are questions about a proposed development or alteration to a development, or if you have any other questions related to Part 4 policies and enforcement. Although the following ideas discussed in this section are not included in the Source Protection Plan as part of drinking water source protection in the Cataraqui Source Protection Area, it is important to understand the implications of the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan on these processes. A transport pathway is a human-made passage where water can flow on its way to a drinking water intake or well. In wellhead protection areas, examples of transport pathways include sewers, drainage ditches, utility trenches, or improperly constructed or maintained wells. In intake protection zones, examples of transport pathways include ditches, storm sewers, tile drainage, or sanitary sewers. The creation of a new transport pathway or the modification of an existing transport pathway has the potential to increase the vulnerability of an intake protection zone or wellhead protection area. Additional landowners or businesses may become subject to source protection policies as a result of an increased vulnerability score. Subsection 27(3) of Ontario Regulation 287/07 under the Clean Water Act requires municipalities to notify the Source Protection Authority and the Source Protection Committee if they receive a proposal that may create a new transport pathway or modify an existing transport pathway. The Transport Pathway Notification Submission Guide, Form, and Fact Sheet are available on the Clean Water Cataraqui website under the Resources page. When providing notification of a potential transport pathway, the municipality must include the following information: the name and contact information for the person responsible for the proposal, a description of the proposal, and a description of the approvals required for the proposed activity. If the Cataraqui Source Protection Authority finds that the proposed activity may cause changes in the vulnerability of an intake protection zone or wellhead protection area, then it may make recommendations to the municipality in response to the application and/or propose an amendment to the Source Protection Plan that relates to the implementation of the proposal. It is important to note that this Transport Pathway Notification procedure does not apply to municipal activities. Updates are being proposed to the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment to include source protection considerations. If a project is proposed in a vulnerable area and may pose a risk to drinking water, the project could be impacted by policies in the Source Protection Plan. The proposed project must take the Source Protection Plan policies into consideration during the project planning stage. Early on in the process of a Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, proponents must identify if a project could potentially occur within a vulnerable area and must document this consideration in the project file. If a project is proposed that may create new or alter existing vulnerable areas, i.e. for any proposed projects that will expand the use of existing or draw on a new source of municipal residential drinking water, source protection plans will need to be updated to incorporate these vulnerable areas. New or expanded vulnerable areas could cause additional landowners or businesses to become subject to policies in the Source Protection Plan. Therefore, it is recommended that the technical work required by the Clean Water Act to identify the vulnerable area and potential drinking water threats be undertaken concurrently with the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment. This will facilitate the assessment of potential impacts and allow a more comprehensive consultation process with potentially affected stakeholders. Coordinating this work will also expedite Source Protection Plan amendments to incorporate the new system or any changes to existing systems that may be required. It will also limit the likelihood of the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment proponents having to amend completed projects to reflect the technical work required by the Clean Water Act. To determine if the project could potentially occur within a vulnerable area, the municipality should refer to the interactive maps found on the Clean Water Cataraqui website and the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan to assess the location of the project in relation to vulnerable areas. For example, this air photo is provided through the interactive maps and will help to ensure adequate site location during project screening. To determine if the project could include significant threats to sources of drinking water, the municipality should review the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change's Table of Drinking Water Threats shown on this slide, as well as the search tool developed by Upper Thames Conservation Authority, which is also shown here. Please note that the two images located at the top right of this slide are hyperlinks to the drinking water threat identification tools. Using these tools, you can search by vulnerable area to find out what activities are identified as a significant drinking water threat under the Clean Water Act. Once the threats associated with the proposed project have been identified, you can refer to the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan to find out which policies in the plan apply to the proposed project. Based on this information, the proposed project can be developed with the appropriate source protection considerations. Questions about source water protection in general, the Cataraqui Source Protection Plan, or Part 4 policies can all be directed to staff at the CRCA. Holly Evans is the lead risk management official at the CRCA. Aaron Murphy-Mills is the source protection assistant at the CRCA. Contact information for source protection staff is provided on this slide.